Welcome everyone to this demonstration of ArchivesSpace and overview of ArchivesSpace member benefits. I'm Jessica Crouch, the Community Engagement Coordinator for ArchivesSpace, and I'm joined today by Christine DeBella, the ArchivesSpace Program Manager. Christine and I are both archivists with experience working in a variety of archives and libraries. On the ArchivesSpace team, we're involved in all aspects of ArchivesSpace development and outreach and work closely with the ArchivesSpace member community and governance to implement and execute goals for the application. We look forward to talking with you today about the ArchivesSpace application and member community. This session is intended for people considering using ArchivesSpace. If you are already an ArchivesSpace user or member, this presentation will probably not offer any new information, but you are more than welcome to attend. I'll begin by giving a brief overview of ArchivesSpace before moving to a light demonstration of the application itself. After, I'll provide information about ArchivesSpace membership and member benefits. We are using the latest version of ArchivesSpace for this demo. That's version 3.3.1. If you are using an earlier version of ArchivesSpace, keep in mind some of the features you see today may not be available to you. We also won't be able to troubleshoot issues with your own implementation of ArchivesSpace at your organization, and we're going to be focusing this demonstration on using the ArchivesSpace staff user interface and public user interface. If you have a question or an issue with your own implementation, you can always email us at archivespacehome@lyrasis.org. This session is being recorded, and all of the presentation slides you're going to see, as well as the links you'll see, will be made available with the recording. So, what is ArchivesSpace? ArchivesSpace is an open source content management system used by archivists in a variety of settings to manage and describe their collections. ArchivesSpace supports a range of functions performed in archives and special collections, including accessioning, arrangement, description, preservation, and access, and allows archivists to describe a variety of materials, including both physical items and digital objects. ArchivesSpace is the successor to two widely used open source applications, Archivist Toolkit and Archon. While these applications are no longer being maintained, we know that many archives continue to use these two systems, and we do have migration tools available on our website for those users looking to migrate to ArchivesSpace from these legacy systems. And ArchivesSpace is developed by archivists, supported by diverse archival repositories, and fills a common need for archives around the world. While the ArchivesSpace application is free to download and use, ArchivesSpace has a membership model to support the development of the application and user community. Only organizations that are members of ArchivesSpace directly contribute to the sustainability of the application, and members to ArchivesSpace are entitled to certain tangible benefits. I'm going to get into those benefits after the demo. In addition to these benefits, members also serve on the various governance groups within ArchivesSpace, including our User Advisory Council and Technical Advisory Council. Members are also asked to participate in community discussions and polls about the future development of the application. In this way, ArchivesSpace members work together to create and improve an archives management application reflecting our values as archivists. That means that ArchivesSpace is standards-driven, flexible and extensible, customizable and localizable. It integrates with other applications people use to do their work, and it promotes efficiency overall. And ArchivesSpace is and provides an opportunity for archivists to manage and make available as much of their archival material as possible, or as you'd like, no matter your institutional setting. We have ArchivesSpace members working in large government archives and major academic institutions, as well as community archives and lone arrangers working at very small organizations. ArchivesSpace promotes adoptions of standards and develops shared best practices across all of these organizations and brings people from different sizes and types of institutions together to solve common problems we all share. ArchivesSpace also provides the opportunity to take all of this work, all of this archival description, and make it available to users via a public user interface. We're going to see that a little bit later. So with that, I guess I'll go ahead and move over into the application demonstration. So let me head into my browser. Okay, so you should now be seeing ArchivesSpace. So Christine, if you're not seeing ArchivesSpace, let me know. I'm going to spend most of our time exploring the ArchivesSpace staff user interface, which is what we're looking at now. This is where archivists and those working to describe material will be spending most of their time. After, I'll move very briefly to show what the ArchivesSpace public user interface looks like for your researchers and patrons. Before I dive into the demo, I want to mention that all of the examples we're using today are real collections held by ArchivesSpace member organizations. These organizations made their metadata available to the program for the purposes of education and training, and in the interest of creating a more diverse set of example data for users. We're very grateful to these organizations for their willingness to share their data. So, what are you looking at right now? Right now, you're looking at the ArchivesSpace staff user interface landing page. When you log into ArchivesSpace, this is what you will see. It's pretty sparse, but from this page, you're able to basically invoke any sort of function you would like. So the staff user interface is broken down into 4 areas, 4 command zones, if you want to call them that. The first that I want to highlight, if you're watching my mouse, right up here, this is where you have repository and application management. So this is where you can invoke functions that are going to impact ArchivesSpace system-wide. So depending on the level of permission that you have, you will be able to see some, all, or none of these functions in ArchivesSpace. Not everyone has the administrative privileges to make these sorts of changes in the application. Obviously, you don't want that. If you are a user who is working with one single repository within ArchivesSpace, meaning maybe you're at a very large organization where you all want to share an ArchivesSpace instance because you want to link your collections and make your materials more accessible to your researchers, but you also, maybe you have one department that needs to maintain their collections separately, or you're at a single special collections library at a major academic university, and you have 7 different special collections libraries. You want to have your own individual repositories. You can definitely do that within ArchivesSpace, and then link all of your collections together through shared records, like subject linkage and agent linkage. If you are an administrator within ArchivesSpace, you will have permission to move between all of these repositories by making that selection here. But if you're a user within a single repository, or if you have users who only want to work within a single repository, they will not be able to do that. They'll just log in and be right in the single repository they're able to work in and can get right to work. But if you need to move between repositories, you can do that here. It's also where you can set some systems, change some things within the system. It's where you can manage control value lists, top container profiles, location profiles. We're not going to get into any of this. It's where you can manage users if you need to manage your repositories, if you need to change some information about a repository. But this is sort of higher level application management that most people are not going to be doing, and you're probably not going to be doing in your day-to-day work within ArchivesSpace. This is also where you can go, again, depending on your permissions, to set certain preferences. So you can set preferences for yourself if you're just a user with sort of a more basic level of access in ArchivesSpace. But if you're an administrator, you can set preferences that will take place or take effect at the repository level, and then also at the global level. So just know that you can change and manipulate preferences as you need to, and they can take effect in different ways and at different levels here. Below that, the next section you have, this is where you can go to manage user permissions, preference management. This is where we're not going to get into how granular you can make permissions, but you can give people the level of permission you would like for them to have, the ability to maybe create and edit records, but not delete them. And you can really get into that here, where you can manage groups and user access. It's also where you can manage some things related to certain record types in ArchivesSpace. If you're using ArchivesSpace to make assessments of your materials, you can change those assessment attributes here. You can manage your top containers here, your boxes and things here. It's also where you can do something like transfer a repository, which you will probably never have to do. And if you do, you'll probably only have to do it once. And it's also where you can go to do certain things like invoke background jobs. So if you need to run reports, you can do that here, create a custom report if you need specific information, and then invoke that here, generate a PDF, that sort of thing. This is also where you can go to access and download bulk import templates for ArchivesSpace. So while you can create records directly in the ArchivesSpace staff user interface, you probably also want to know how to do that a little bit quicker. And one way to do that is through our bulk import template. So you can use spreadsheets to get your collections in a little bit quicker, so or allow people to record data a little bit differently through those templates, and then you can upload those into ArchivesSpace. So that's you can do all of that from this section. This is also where if you have any plugins that you use with ArchivesSpace, you can invoke those here. Out of the box, ArchivesSpace comes with the LCNAF import tool, which allows you to import subject and agent records. We're not going to get into that today, but that is something that comes out of the box with ArchivesSpace. The third section that I'm going to highlight is right here, the ability to browse and create records. Browse is what it sounds like. If you select this, you get a drop down of different record types, and you can select a specific record type to browse. And I'm going to talk about the record types in just a second, but you can go here, browse specific record types, filter down and find specific records that you're looking for. Or if the record doesn't exist, you can create records here. So to create a record, you simply hit create and select the record type you would like to create from the dropdown. You're going to see there are many records that you can create in ArchivesSpace, but if you look at the top three, these are session, resource, and digital object records. I'm going to talk about each of these record types specifically in just a minute. But if you notice, there's like a little line here that divides them from the rest of the record types. That's because these three record types are known collectively as archival objects or material description records. So this is the record about your collections, your accession records, your resource records, which you probably call your finding aid or your catalog. In ArchivesSpace, they're called resource records, and your digital object records. So where you can record metadata about your digital materials. Both resource records and digital object records allow for multi-level description. So it could be a single record if it needs to be, but you also can build out that hierarchy there like you would do within a finding aid. And I'm going to show what that looks like later. Below the little line, all of these record types that you can create: subject, agent, location, event, classification, assessments. These records are for amplifying the material description records, the accession records, the digital object records, the resource records. So that's where you can indicate where the material is located through locations. Obviously, it's where you can link related collections through subjects or agents being people, family, corporate bodies, software, agent records. It's where you can make assessments of material if something maybe needs to be rehoused, or something has some damage that you want to indicate. You can do that through an assessment, or you can create an event record, an event indicating the collection has now been processed. You can do that, and then you can link those records back to the accession, resource, and digital object records as appropriate. However, you could just create these records on their own and allow them to exist within your ArchivesSpace. So for example, maybe you want to create your location records in bulk. You want to indicate all of the different shelves that you have available to you, and then later you can just link the collections back to those locations as appropriate. Or maybe you want to create a really in-depth thesaurus of subject headings that are available to you, and then when you create a record, those are just there for you to link as appropriate. So you can create all of these different records on their own, and they can stand alone within ArchivesSpace without having to be linked to an accession, resource, or digital object. But the idea is that eventually they will be linked to an accession, resource, or digital object. And then you see here, you also can create those background jobs. So this is another place you can invoke background jobs. And it's the same that we talked about over with the gear menu. And then finally, the fourth section of the staff user interface is the search functionality. So you can do a basic keyword search. You can search all records just like this. So with browsing, you're browsing specific record types. If you want to search across all record types, that's where you would do this here. And you can do a basic keyword search and search all records, or you can build a more advanced search if you would like. Both options search every type of record in the ArchivesSpace application. With advanced search, you can build out 3 different fields and link them together if you would like. The advanced search fields can be used in any combination together, but they would be connected with the Boolean operators and or not. And is the default search option for searching. So with that, I'm gonna leave the landing page for the staff user interface, and I'm going to dive into a few different record types. I'm going to show what session records look like, resource records, both a single level resource record, as well as a multi-level resource record with some hierarchy, and then a digital object record. And then I'm going to move into the public user interface very briefly. So I just moved over, and what we're looking at now is an accession record in ArchivesSpace. Before I get into the fields within this specific record, I want to highlight a few things that you will notice with all records within ArchivesSpace. If you happen to find yourself in ArchivesSpace and you're a little lost, you don't know how you got to the particular record, you can always follow your breadcrumbs home. So just keep in mind that when you're looking at a record and you're not sure if you're looking in a session record or a resource record, you can always just follow the breadcrumbs. And here it's letting me know that I have this record open in edit mode, not just view mode. I could be editing these fields and saving them. It tells you what the specific record is. And then it tells me it's in a session. If I click this, it would take me to the list of accession records to browse. And then if I just really didn't want to be here at all, I could click home and I could go home. So you can always follow those breadcrumbs to get back where you need to be. Another thing to keep in mind as we're moving around these records, you're going to see these little question marks popping up. And these are content sensitive help links. They're letting you know that there is a page in our user manual that relates to this section of the record you are looking at. So if you have questions about the record you're creating or a sub record within that, you can always click those little question marks and it will take you directly to the page of the user manual that relates to what you're doing. Our user manual is a benefit of membership to ArchivesSpace. So if you are an ArchivesSpace member and want to click that link and get to the Help Center, you absolutely can. You do need to be logged into the Help Center, so you may get a warning that you don't have access. It's because you're not logged in. If you are not an ArchivesSpace member and you get the warning about access, that is because it's a benefit of membership to ArchivesSpace, and you can always reach out to us if you're interested in becoming ArchivesSpace members. Another thing I wanted to point out, again, as we're moving around record types, you're going to see asterisks. If you see a red asterisk, that indicates that this field is required. I think that's pretty standard. You may also see gray asterisks as we move around, or you will see gray asterisks. Gray asterisks mean that that field is conditionally required. That means that in order to save the record, you either need to include information in that field or another field. So you're probably wondering, how do I know what that means when it's conditionally required? A really handy thing about ArchivesSpace is if there's a field that you are confused about, you can hover over the label and a tooltip will pop up for you. The rollover text are associated with almost all of the labels, like I said. And the rollover normally will consist of a definition of whatever the element is to help you understand what it is. If there is an appropriate rule in DAX or an element in an export data format like MARC or EAD that it relates to, we'll mention that. And it may just give some examples of good practice. So they're very handy and helpful. They are also customizable. So if you have specific rules at your own organization, you can also indicate that there. So if there's a label that you want to use a specific way, you can do it there. We are looking at an accession record. So accession records store information about the receipt of materials, which are typically unprocessed. You do not have to record accession records in ArchivesSpace. I know that some institutions have their own system for recording assessment records or accession records, and that's totally fine. You don't have to have an accession record in order to then move on and create a resource record, though you can, and it is possible to spawn one record for another. It could represent the acquisition of a new resource or an accrual of an existing resource. It is required to include an identifier and the dates of the accession. That is all it is required to include, but obviously you're going to want to include much more information about it probably. And then if you can always link your accessions to other related collections. So if this is an accession that is an accrual, you can always link it to the accession records of your past accruals, or you can always link it to the resource record that it relates to as you begin to process the collection. But you can include as much or as little information here as you would like. Here we're looking at the accession record for the Krispy Kreme corporate records, which are at the Smithsonian. And you can see there is some information that has been provided here, but keep in mind you only need to include as much information as you'd like. Just because a field exists doesn't mean data needs to be included there. And as you're moving through the record, you're including basic information about the accession. You can include language information. Here's the required information about dates. And as I mentioned, there is a gray asterisk here that indicates a conditionally required field. The requirement being you need to either include a date expression here or machine readable dates. The creator of this record decided to include both. And then you can also begin to open up other record types or other sub-record types and include more information. Again, you're seeing red asterisks, which you said, but Jessica, you didn't say extents are required. They're not. However, if you open up a sub-record that has required fields, you will not be able to save the record until you've either supplied that information or removed the record. You also hear those records we talked about that are meant to amplify your accession resource in digital objects. Here's where you can link those agents. So here they have linked the creator of the record, which is Krispy Kreme, the source of the record, which is Krispy Kreme, and then as well as another creator. So you can indicate whatever role your agent, the person has as maybe the creator, the donor, a subject of the material. You can indicate that here. You can also, once the collection is processed, you can link that related resource as I mentioned. But again, none of this is required. There's much more that you can include. It's optional and up to you. So these are all of the different fields that you can include related to accession records. But I'm going to move on from that. So this is what an accession record looks like. It's telling me that I removed that and I have unsaved changes, but I'm not going to save them. It's a single level sort of flat record. You can't create any hierarchy here. You're not building out your finding aid in your accession record. This record is really just intended to indicate that you took possession of the material. Once you begin processing the material, then you will create a resource record. So this is a single level resource record, and it's for a diary. This record doesn't have any hierarchy. If there was, you would see it here, and I'm going to show an example of that in just a minute. But it does have all of the description that you would need for this collection. There are significantly more required fields in a resource record. You're seeing more red asterisks already. And you can also indicate as you're moving through whether or not you would like to publish these materials. You can also publish accession records, though I know many people prefer not to. So you're seeing many more required fields to save this record. But again, you're able to record information about language, dates, moving very quickly. And we do have trainings if you're looking at it's more into how to fill out these and considerations to make. There are trainings on our YouTube channel, but I'm trying to indicate the types of fields in each record type. Specific to resource records, there is the finding a data field. If you are interested in using any of our templates, using load via spreadsheet to bring in your resource records, you will need to use the finding a data field for that. So I wanted to point that out. And then again, you get down into the ability to link related records. Here we have an agent has been linked. And then I wanted to point out, you'll see here also subjects have been linked. If you have more than 5 record types or sub-records within a record, it will collapse those. It's trying just to improve performance. If you want to see all of the different subjects, you just need to click it and it will show you. So here are all of the subjects that have been applied here. And if a researcher were browsing or searching subjects, if they clicked scrapbooks within this repository, all of the related scrapbooks, including this one, would pop up. So you want to make sure you're using subjects where appropriate, and keep in mind that they are shared across the entire implementation. You don't need to be creating a new subject for every single resource record. You just draw from the thesaurus that already exists where appropriate and link things together that way. This is also where you can include notes. There are 12 notes for this. You don't have to have 12 notes, but this is where you can include, this is where you will include your scope and content note. There's a preferred citation here, conditions governing access and use, any information that you normally would see as sort of the front matter of your finding aid. You would include that here in your resource record. And there's much more information you can include. Again, we have trainings online that relate to how to apply all of that, but you also could include things like the location of the material and that sort of thing. I'm going to scroll back up to the top kind of quickly. So this is just a single level resource record. I'm going to move back over to the Krispy Kreme example that we've been using. The Krispy Kreme Corporation records is an example of a resource record with significant hierarchy. So if you have a finding aid where you've really built out your series and your subseries, you can represent that in ArchivesSpace by creating a resource record like we just saw, and then adding children and siblings and building the hierarchy that way. It's also possible, again, to use templates and do things like loading via spreadsheet and some rapid data entry tools that we're not going to have time to get into in this demo. But again, you're able to build out the hierarchy. Here we have several series. Within this series, you have files, but within another series, you may have even more granular description. Here we have subseries within this series before you get into the file. So ArchivesSpace really allows you the ability to create as much hierarchy and description as is appropriate. So that's what a resource record looks like. And then the final record type I'll just show very briefly is digital object record. Let me catch up in my notes. So a few things about digital objects. ArchivesSpace is not a digital asset management system. So I'll say that again. ArchivesSpace is not a digital asset management system. So you cannot ingest or store digital materials into ArchivesSpace. ArchivesSpace supports the management of digital object metadata, so it allows you to manage the description of your digital material in the same place you're managing the description of your physical material, and then you're able to link all of that within one system, so it makes it easier for yourself as well as your patrons to discover these materials. But the assumption is that this digital content is being stored somewhere else. Maybe it's a file server, maybe it is a digital asset management system that you're using, but it's being stored somewhere in a network where it is web accessible. If you want, of course, you may have materials that you don't want to be web accessible, but if you're intending to make it available to your patrons, it would need to be linked somewhere where it would be accessible. You would provide that link to ArchivesSpace right here where it asks for a file URI. And then within the public user interface, that link would be there and your researcher could click it and it would take them to wherever the material lives and they could look at the image there, but all of the description and metadata that they need could be provided via ArchivesSpace, and ArchivesSpace could be the system of record or just the pointer for that digital material. You can export your digital objects as METs, mods, or Dublin Core. And you can link them, as I said, to any related accession record or resource record or any of their component records within ArchivesSpace. Similar to resource records, digital objects allow for you to create a single level record or a record with hierarchy. So a single level record is a simple digital object. So that's one where the intellectual content is contained in one digital file. So if you just have one PDF of a scrapbook, the whole scrapbook is in one single PDF. You can describe that as a simple digital object with no hierarchy within ArchivesSpace. But maybe that same scrapbook, you actually digitized it and every individual page is a PDF, and you would like to recreate the structure of that scrapbook. So you would have a title page, and then you want each individual page to be a child under that. You could do that by creating a complex digital object. So it's where that intellectual content is distributed over multiple digital content files, like I mentioned. That's much more multi-level in structure. And you would build that structure in the same way you would build a structure for a resource record. ArchivesSpace is flexible and allows you to do that either way. Digital objects is obviously, it can be pretty complicated. There are several training sessions on our YouTube channel that get into managing digital objects in ArchivesSpace. So if you're really looking to dive in digital objects, I recommend reviewing some of those resources. And then finally, ArchivesSpace has a public user interface, and that's where I just moved. I just moved over a tab, but from within ArchivesSpace, if you ever want to navigate between the staff user interface and the public user interface, you can always do that down at the bottom. From the public user interface, it'll just say staff interface, and you click it and it will take you from the staff user interface. I'm going to scroll really quickly. It says public user interface. You just click view public user interface to move between the two. This is the public user interface for ArchivesSpace. It's where any any of the archival description you have decided to publish would be made available to your researchers. The public user interface is optional. Instead of using the public user interface, some repositories may choose to export metadata outputs into other systems, or they may use a different front end. This is what the default homepage of the public user interface looks like without any customizations. Obviously, you're going to want to change the logo to your logo. You're going to probably want to change the title to the name of your institution, maybe the color scheme to reflect your own colors that you use. There are many different ways to customize it to make it your own. And then the community has even created additional plugins to help build that out and make it even more customizable for your users. ArchivesSpace automatically indexes all information into the system, but you must use the publish checkbox on the staff interface to display a particular record or part of a record in the public user interface. So just because you have saved a record on the staff side does not mean it's going to become publicly available. You also have the ability to hide certain tabs. So unprocessed materials, that means accession records. I know many institutions don't like to make their accession records discoverable. You could just hide that tab, and that option wouldn't even exist there. From within this staff user or public user interface, researchers can search by repository, meaning they could browse individual repositories and browse the collections specific to those repositories, or they could just browse by collection or subject or name. But when they're browsing or searching within the public user interface, they are searching across all records in all repositories, not just one individual repository, unless they elect to drill down in that way. So here you're seeing all of the collections available across all repositories in this implementation, and you can filter within those results. Or again, you could go and just do a basic keyword search or a more advanced search, just like you can in the staff user interface. So with that, I'm going to move over very quickly back to our slides and talk a little bit about ArchivesSpace membership. As I mentioned before, while the ArchivesSpace application is free to download and use, ArchivesSpace has a membership model to support the development of the application and user community. Since ArchivesSpace members directly contribute to the sustainability of the application, they get certain benefits, in addition to the ability to serve on those governance councils and provide input on development, like I mentioned. So a little background about membership. There are currently 468 ArchivesSpace member organizations, and membership is at the organizational level. So all employees within an organization are entitled to all member benefits. Membership is distributed across 5 levels with corresponding fees. That ranges from the very small level, which has a $300 a year membership fee, to very large, which has a $7,500 a year membership fee. Over half of our members are either in the very small or small member categories. Membership levels are intended to reflect organizational size and capacity. All members are entitled to the same benefits regardless of size. And again, I am going to be providing a series of links at the end of this presentation with this information and more. So I'll make sure a link to these slides is included with the recording. And a little bit about those tangible benefits to membership. If you are an ArchivesSpace member, you are eligible for access to the ArchivesSpace Help Center, which includes the ArchivesSpace user manual as well as user tutorial videos. You get access to member-only events and programs like our ArchivesSpace member forums that we hold every year, as well as the ArchivesSpace member match program. That's a peer-to-peer support program you might be interested in. You also get access to member-only listservs so that you can talk with other users across the community. You also get discounts on training. We have community-wide trainings on a variety of topics, and you receive those at a significant discount. And of course, you get technical support using the application. And finally, this slide, which I'll be including with the recording, contains helpful links to reference as you explore ArchivesSpace. You can also find all of this on our website. The first link is to our Getting Started page. From there, you can download the application. You can watch more demos or watch other recordings on YouTube. There's an ArchivesSpace sandbox that you can explore that might help you decide if it's the right tool for your needs, as well as several other just general resources and references that might be helpful. And additionally, I've included links that talk about the benefits to membership as well as membership fees and levels. And then maybe you are in this session and you're already thinking you'd like to use ArchivesSpace, you'd like to become ArchivesSpace members. You just need to communicate that to your colleagues or maybe to your supervisor. We have created some talking points that might help you frame that conversation. So that's the making a case for ArchivesSpace membership. I've linked that there to help maybe get the ball rolling. And then the link to the who's using ArchivesSpace section. So if you want to see a list of current ArchivesSpace users, and of course you can always email us directly and we're happy to talk. So I'm going to go ahead and move into the Q&A section. And Christine, you're welcome to answer any questions as well if you would prefer to answer them. But if you're interested in learning more about ArchivesSpace or ArchivesSpace membership and we can't get to your question, feel free to send us an email, archivespace@lyrasis.org, and we will get back to you. So I'm going to go ahead and look at the Q&A. All right. So we have I work in a closed archive that is not accessible to the public. If I do not select publish on their records or sessions, would everything remain private? It would. And you wouldn't even necessarily need to be concerned with hitting publish or not. If you were keeping your implementation of ArchivesSpace on a private server, it would not be publicly available. So there are many ways to keep that secure so that the public doesn't access it. And on that note, when my stakeholders access material through the staff interface as opposed to the public interface, that would be something that you could decide. You may not want your stakeholders having access to the staff user interface and seeing the back end. You could always maybe work out a way for them to have access through the public user interface if they are accessing that material on site. So if you're trying to keep things secure and in an internal server, if they're able to access that material, you maybe could give them access to the public user interface so they're able to see what you want them to see, but not able to get in the back end and manipulate records. All right. Are you able to hide some fields in your accession records so that you can't see everything in your accession records via the public user interface? So the ability to hide fields in the PUI, that would probably need to be a plugin. I'll pause and see if Christine wants to interrupt me.
No, absolutely. So a plugin is like a small set of code that overrides things on either the staff interface or the public interface. It can be used to just change things like colors, things that are visual, or it can be used to change or extend functionality. So as Jessica said, this would be an example of something that you would do via plugin to change some things about how the public interface looks or works for you.
Thanks, Christine. In the identifier field, did I see multiple places to enter data? Can each record have more than one identifier, and do identifiers have to be unique? So for the identifiers, the different sections that you saw, that allows you to sort of structure the identifier as you would like. It's all one single identifier. Some people prefer to break it up. You're able to do 4 different sections for the identifier, or you could put the identifier just in one of those. You do not have to use all 4. You could, and you don't have to use 1. You could use 3. But that is one single identifier, and identifiers do need to be unique. They need to be unique for the type of record you're creating. There is some wiggle room on reusing identifiers for different record types, but I'm not going to get into that. But your identifiers do need to be unique. Are there any plans to expand ArchivesSpace to be a digital asset management system?
So
Christine, I'll let you answer it.
Yeah, I can answer this one. So one of the design principles of ArchivesSpace is to essentially do the parts of an archival workflow or types of functionality that archives use to do the piece that we can do really well, and then interact through our API and through other ways that 2 systems can interact with each other, interact with other systems that can do pieces of the workflow or functionality that they do really well. So there are lots of different digital asset management systems out there, and they can be quite complex applications. So to give people like the most choice without having to become a digital asset management system ourselves, that's what we focus on. We focus on the pieces of an archival workflow, like accessioning, like finding aid creation, like managing things in your stacks. We focus on those pieces that aren't done by as many applications. We are working right now on some improved functionality for the pieces of digital objects management that we do focus on. So as Jessica said, ArchivesSpace is for creating metadata related to digital objects that are stored elsewhere, and for linking to digital objects that are stored elsewhere. So some of our development right now is focused on making that metadata creation and linking easier, and making things display in the public interface a little bit more pleasing than they are right now for people who choose to use the public interface. But we don't intend to change the overall model of ArchivesSpace to become a digital asset management system.
Thanks, Christine. All right. Within a resource record with data like preferred citation, etc., is there a way to upload a template so you don't have to enter the same data for every individual record? That's a good question. It is possible within ArchivesSpace to save default values for record types. So yeah, if you have a preferred citation that you use every single time, or if you have some sort of standard conditions governing access, some sort of note that you use every time, you can use those default values so that whenever you go to create a new record, those values will already be populated there. You also could use it to just as a placeholder of if you have student workers or something working in the application, you can put make sure you include this field, or make sure you're using whole numbers for the extent, and then they know it's flagged there for them to go, I need to go in and make sure I am doing that. So yeah, default values, it's a pretty cool and very helpful tool I have found in saving a lot of time. How do other institutions link ArchivesSpace with their digital asset management system? That would depend on the system. We had a webinar series, and you can find our webinars on our website on integrations with ArchivesSpace, where different systems that integrate and work with ArchivesSpace that archivists use. We talked about how those integrations work with someone from each institution coming and talking about their application, and someone talking about ArchivesSpace and how the integrations work. And there were some digital asset management systems represented there. So check that out if maybe your digital asset management system is highlighted there in a webinar. But ArchivesSpace has an open API for integration. So if you're looking specifically at integrations, it's possible. Otherwise, there are many different ways to get that information into ArchivesSpace. We have some templates that you can use, as well as just linking that URI.
And probably emphasize again what Jessica showed in the digital object records. There is a place within digital object records to link digital objects that are stored elsewhere. So whether that's on a file server, sort of by themselves in a folder, or whether that's a whole fully featured digital asset management system, there's a place in the records to do that. And you can link one digital object, or you can link many digital objects to the same record within ArchivesSpace.
Thanks, Christine. When people use ArchivesSpace to link to a digital object on a digital asset management system, would you say it's more common for people to link to access copies for easy engagement, or to their preservation-focused digital objects? It's a great question to ask the user community, and archivists use digital objects in a variety of ways. Some people use digital objects to point to those access copies, just like you said, and then some people are using ArchivesSpace to record all of the different versions of their digital object. And you can do that within one single digital object record. You don't need to create a digital object record for your access copy and a digital object record for your preservation copy. You would just link all of those different versions, file versions within the same record. And it's possible that that file URI that we're talking about, that link, that place where you indicate where the digital object lives, that you can then click and go look at where it lives, you can add as many of those file versions as you need. So if you would like to record, there is a preservation copy as well as an access copy, you can do that within one single digital object record. Is there a limit to the number or size of files you can attach to a digital object record? So since ArchivesSpace isn't ingesting the file, the size of the file is less of a consideration. It's just about that link. The number you can link, I've never heard anyone reaching a limit to the number, so I'm not sure if it exists.
There's no like within the code limit, like you can only add 10 or you can only add 1,000. So there's no limit that way. There may be a practical limit as a human, how many you want to put in there, but there's not any built-in limit into the system.
Any other questions? We're caught up on the Q&A. Like I said, there on our YouTube channel, there are many different trainings, some basics trainings that get into creating record types in ArchivesSpace, as well as a digital object specific training, and lots of other resources on our Getting Started page that may help answer some questions. But if you have any questions that you would like answered right now, please feel free to type them into the Q&A. Christine, anything you'd like to add? See if there's any last minute questions that pop up, or we'll wrap up a little early.
No, I think this was a great demo. As Jessica said, there are so many different parts to ArchivesSpace and so many different things that you can do. So you'll see as you explore more of the resources that are out there, just all the many different kinds of things you can do. But what Jessica showed you is really the core, and really like the kinds of things that probably every archivist, every archives has a need for. So we hope this gets you started really thinking about it as a system.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. It made people ask questions, so that's good. So I'll also mention some of the questions that are popping up are questions about workflow and processes, and that's one of the real benefits of being a member of ArchivesSpace, of being part of a community of practice, is being able to say, hey, I'm looking at implementing digital objects. I'm thinking about doing it these two different ways, and you'll get insight on what does work and what doesn't work. And you know, archivists, we're very honest about what does work and what doesn't work. So being able to communicate with the other users on the listserv, it's a huge benefit, especially when you're really starting to think through implementation and think through documenting your own processes. So some of these questions are really great questions for a larger community discussion. So I hope that you do consider membership and being part of that larger discussion. If I did, going back to the Q&A, if I decide to go with ArchivesSpace, do I need to be a member for installation support? So technical support is included as one of the member benefits. So if you needed help installing ArchivesSpace locally, you would be able to do that as a member. We would create a tech support ticket for you, and someone would reach out and walk you through those installation steps. Can you write custom reports or edit existing reports in ArchivesSpace? You can definitely write custom reports, and there's documentation for how to do that in our tech docs. And then there is a custom report feature within ArchivesSpace. It is not, it allows you to create to customize reports within ArchivesSpace, but to a limit. Obviously, we can't anticipate what every single report everyone might want to run is. So if you do want to write your own custom reports and implement those within ArchivesSpace, that's also possible. Yeah, and then some more questions about installation. If feel free to email us and we can talk a little more about options related to that. But if you're at an institution where you have an IT department or a sysadmin, you're probably going to want to get them involved with the installation of the application.
And we should mention, even though membership is very important, and that's the best way to use ArchivesSpace, because you're supporting the future of the application, you're protecting your investment, you're able to get involved with the community. We do have some resources, just as Jessica mentioned, for accessing information about training. We also have some freely available resources related to installation. So our technical documentation is available, but it does usually require somebody who understands how to set up servers and things like that. So if your institution has that, then the technical documentation may be enough to get you going. If you don't have that, or you need a whole lot more than that, then membership is something you should really seriously consider, in addition to all the other reasons to consider membership.
All right. No other questions in the Q&A. I'm trying to talk slowly, but this was a really great session, and I think that's a good note to end it on. So we'll go ahead and get 5 minutes back to our day. Thank you everyone for attending and for your great questions. And if you have more questions or want to talk about ArchivesSpace membership, please do feel free to email us. We're happy to talk ArchivesSpace all day. Thank you again, and I look forward to hearing from all of you soon. Thanks, everybody.